There you go. All right.
So where are we?
We are in Parashat Shmini, and it's on page 630 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash.
Yeah.
This is Vayikra chapter 9, and Shmini means eighth, like Shmini Atzeret, the eighth day of assembly. And here the eighth day, Vayhi Bayom HaShmini, on the eighth day, Kara Moshe li'Aaron u'levanav u'leziknei Yisrael. So he says on the eighth day of what? The answer is that we're continuing from last week or from the last parsha. It's been a little break here because of Pesach, but the last Torah portion talked about getting ready to start using the tabernacle, the Mishkan. So we had the whole second half of Exodus about building the Mishkan, getting it all ready, and the first two sections of Vayikra are about here's the way that these sacrifices will be offered in the Mishkan, and then the elaborate, planning. It's an event planning of initiating the priests into this wonderful ceremony of what's the word in English? Consecration. Chanukah Habayit. It's the open house for the first time. This tabernacle is going to be used to serve God, and for 7 days the priests are inducted into their service, and they can't leave the precincts of the sanctuary and so on. And now we're at the eighth day. So they've been trained, they've been invested with their clothes and so on, and now they're actually going to begin. So this is the eighth day of this process, and that's where the Torah starts with the Torah portion. And the Aaron and his sons embark on, for the first time in their lives, in actually really offering sacrifices. So that's the beginning of the Torah portion. As we go on, and then the whole point is, and then there's a little bit of drama, and I've written about this before. I wrote a little bit, I alluded to it in the Torah Sparks for this week, that there's a promise by, or a promise by Moses. Watch, he says to everybody. Everybody's hanging around, and he says to everybody, just watch. God will manifest as we do this set of rituals. And there's a few bumps on the road. I don't want to give away too much. A few bumps on the road until that actually happens. So we get finally that it really does successfully get achieved. But then chapter 10 comes along and backs up a little bit and says, meanwhile, while all of this is happening, 2 of Aaron's 4 sons take it upon themselves to enter the tabernacle and offer what's called Eish Zara, foreign, strange fire, some kind of offering of a sacrifice or something like that, that is alien. It wasn't prescribed. And as I said before, this really is completely detailed to the last drop of what has to be done and where it has to be done and who does what. And they end up jumping in and they die. And a fire comes out. They bring a fire, another fire comes out, consumes them, or in some kind of mysterious way, they're consumed, and yet they're still there. Their bodies are lying there. They have to be evacuated from the interior of the Mishkan. And Moses says the show must go on. This is a national requirement to sanctify and initiate this structure and this system. And then we have the drama that we've looked at many times, that's so poignant for all of us, of how Aaron responds and how Aaron handles the loss of 2 of his 4 children at this precise moment. So that's what it takes place in terms of chapter 10. And then we also have some instructions for the priests not to get inebriated, not to drink wine when they're on duty. So that's an extra set of rules that's given to the priests. And the exchange between Moses and Aaron about whether everything was done right or not. I talked a little bit about that in the Torah Sparks this year and in the past. And then finally in chapter 11, we have laws of kashrut. So we have some fairly detailed lists of creatures, land, sea, and air creatures that can be eaten or that can't be eaten. So this is the kosher laws, and this basically goes all the way to the end of our Torah reading, which is the end of chapter 11, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So 9, 10, and 11 are the 3 chapters in Leviticus that comprise this Torah reading, with some quite a bit of laws and regulations, and a pretty, pretty dramatic 2 stories that are in, placed within them. I've mentioned before, the whole book of Vayikra, Leviticus, is short on stories. There are very few stories in this whole entire book, but here we've got some real doozies. Yeah, Jennifer.
Real quick, we don't have to read this part, but I have a question on the phrasing in the kosher laws, where it keeps saying, don't eat this, it's an abomination. Is it the eating of the thing that's an abomination and not the creature itself, as presumably God made this creature and it was good and whatever? Is that like meant to be just eating it is an abomination?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. We'd have to see if we could, come to some kind of judgment one way or the other, but we'd have to, I hate to say it, you have to read.
Well, I'm willing to do that, but if everybody else hates that part or doesn't want to do that part, that's okay. I'll live in the mystery.
So we could take, maybe we'll solve it quicker, and then we can go on to another part, right? So let's see where we find that first. Or, you know what? Well, let's see how far along it is until we finally actually get it.
It's towards it. I mean, it's in the very last page of the reading, according to Yetzayim, if that makes it easy.
Right. So I'm trying to see where, what else. I mean, there's material to go on in terms doesn't use the word toeva, but the word abomination.
On page 638, in verse 10 and verse 11.
So the word is al teshakzu et nafshotechem. That's used a few times. So in where you say 638?
638, verse 10, verse 11, verse 12.
Yeah, and I was looking at the very end at 642.
Right. Yeah. So
there's a lot of it going on.
Right. So the word is sheketz, or teshakzu is the verb. And you know what? All right. Unless there's an uprising here against it, I say we start reading from chapter 11. All right, Jennifer, it's your fault.
Okay, I take it upon myself. Sorry, everyone.
Right, you take the sin responsibility. You're going to have to expiate your sin eventually. But go ahead. When
there's a temple, I'll get right on that.
Right on. All right. Speedily in our time. Okay, 638, chapter 11.
Okay.
Which reminds me, by the way, of a famous story that a person comes to the rabbi, and they're distraught, and they're really so they're falling apart, and they Rabbi, I need help. I need to it's terrible. I owe this one money. I owe that one money. My partner ran away with all of my assets. I don't have anything. Everybody is angry at me. They're ready to throw me in jail. What should I do? What should I do? And the rabbi says, I don't know. This sounds terrible. Let me think about it. Give me a day. And but meanwhile, pray and study Torah, and maybe the merit of these good things will somehow help you. So the next day comes, and the rabbi is very concerned, and the rabbi contacts this person and says, so how, what's going on? What let's talk a little bit. And the person says, you are so right, Rabbi. You're so brilliant. You're so helpful. You told me to study Torah, and as soon as I opened the book, I got my answer. I opened the book, and there it was, chapter 11.
It can be helpful.
Is everybody on mute? I don't get it. Why isn't everybody raucously laughing?
It's only for corporations, chapter 11.
Okay, so I didn't mention the guy was a corporation. Okay.
Corporations are people now too, remember.
That's right.
According to Romney. But not according to McConnell.
Okay, the schmoozing part was over. Now we're up to chapter 11. Leviticus.
On 636 at the beginning?
Yes. In the beginning was chapter 11.
Okay. Do I have to read because I chose it?
I told you.
Okay, all right. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, speak to the Israelite people thus. These are the creatures that you may eat from among all the land animals. Any animal that has true hooves, with clefts through the hoofs, and that chews the cud, such you may eat. The following, however, of those that either chew the cud or have true hooves, you shall not eat. The camel, although it chews the cud, it has no true hooves. It is impure for you. The daemon, although it chews the cud, it has no true hooves. It is impure for you.
In modern Hebrew, that's the rabbit. Hare. I don't know the difference between a rabbit and a hare.
Are they both? Is rabbits actually forbidden? Is that not kosher? Okay, the hare, although it chews the cud, it has no true hooves. It is impure for you. And the swine, although it has true hooves with the hooves cleft through, it does not chew the cud. It is impure for you. You shall not eat of their flesh or touch their carcasses. They are impure for you.
Okay, so just without going into whatever the translations are and actually identifying what these Hebrew names are is a whole subject in and of itself, which I have no hope of clarifying it all. So whatever translation you have, that's what you have. But what we do have is a combination here of rules, abstract rules, and then examples, right? So it doesn't list, for instance, here are the 45 types of cows that you can eat. And they give you the name of every single kind of piece of cattle or sheep or goat or deer or whatever, right? It doesn't mention that kind of stuff. What it gives you is a guiding principle, right? It gives you a guiding principle. These are the kosher animals if they have a split hoof and they chew their cud, then they're kosher. And then they give you a couple of interesting examples of, and you need both, right? Because if it chews its cud, but it doesn't have split hooves, If it has split hooves, but it doesn't chew its cud, If it has a split hoof, but it's not completely split, like a camel has split hoofs from the top, but underneath it has a pad that it walks on. Because it needs the creative design. What's it called? What's that theory about how everything is wonderful in the world?
Intelligent design.
Intelligent design. The intelligent designer said if they're going to walk around in the desert, they need flat pads under their feet. So that's why the Torah says here, it looks like it might have split hooves, but it doesn't. So forget about it. So the camel is the closest, almost kosher animal here, but they're always missing something, right? Yeah, somebody wanted to say something.
Is this so we can extrapolate when we get to the new world as to what animals we haven't seen before are kosher?
This was actually put in by the New World Exploratory.
No, but did they have that, like, it has that feeling like you might run into an animal we don't know about at this moment?
That's exactly later on one of the important features of this whole set of laws, because we're going to see soon that this way of going about it, of how to define what's kosher and what's not by a general principle, is not applied for every category of creature, right? We're going to see that it's applied to a couple of the categories, but not all of them. And then when we don't, in the one where it doesn't apply, and we have a list, here's a list of kosher so-and-so, it's like, I don't want to give away the answer. Then we're going to get into trouble. Then we're going to get, so what if it's not on the list? Or what exactly is on the list? How do you identify the names of these creatures? Yeah, Michael.
Is this an example of the legal principle of a generalization followed by specifics, and what you can learn, when it's structured like that? By saying, this is the principle. You look for a split hoof and chewing its cud, and then it gives you all the very specifics.
Yes, so this is
it actually ends with a little summary line at the end. It says, these were the rules.
Right. So it's not quite that. That's what's called klal uprat, klal upratu klal. There are what's called, principles of interpretation, hermeneutical principles of interpretation. You can look in a traditional siddur, and it's all the way at the beginning of the morning prayers. Rabbi Shmuel gives us 13 such principles. Other people had more and less. But the idea of how do you read a verse where it says, and here's the general principle, and for instance, A, B, C, and D. If we have the general principle, what do we need the A, B, C, and D? And we have how to apply that kind of meaning. What kind of meaning do we extract from that? This is not quite that case, because this is the Torah's. The problem with klal uprat is that the prat actually satisfies exactly the klal, and it seems redundant. Here, what the Torah is saying is, I'm going to give you a general rule, but if you're sloppy, you might think that the following creatures satisfy that rule. They don't satisfy the rule. So here it's really a kind of a preemptive teaching by the Torah that if you're not going to be careful about this rule, you'll end up making mistakes. The klal uprat discussion is where you should not become impure to any member of your family, not your father, not your mother. Hello, any member of your family. I'm not going to think that my father and my mother is not. So that's where you get klal uprat, where it seems like a real redundancy. Here, the Torah is saying, no, you're going to make a mistake here if you're not careful. So there's a little less of that. All right. So let's see now. So this is basically land animals, land creatures, right? What we have is we've got, what are they called? Ruminants, right? That's the chewing the cud one, right? Ruminants that have to have split hooves. Mostly, by the way, the Torah doesn't quite say it that way, but mostly those are domestic animals.
Yeah, well, we're not allowed to hunt, right? So
that's part of the thing. The hunting is just killing animals for no reason, and that we're not allowed to do. We're not allowed to cause pain to an animal without the good reason. That's called tsar ba'alei chayim.
But most hunters aren't killing them for no reason. I mean, usually it's for food.
Well, maybe in the old days, but now some of it is for pleasure. So the hunt was an aristocratic game.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I'm thinking of like now the people I know who hunt. I feel like their meat is more ethical than what goes through factories.
It's an ironic, situation that you're bringing up. Yeah, but if those animals that you would hunt are actually not edible to you because of these laws, then
Yeah.
that can't be that can't be the justification for hunting, right? So, okay, but it doesn't say all your domesticated animals you can eat, but your non-domesticated animals you can't eat. And of course, there are certain domesticated animals, such as my friend over here that's sitting across from me, that I can eat, right? So, which she's very, relieved to know about, right?
Happy to be impure.
Yes, right.
But is this impurity just
I'm impure and I'm proud of it.
that's right. The impurity.
Jennifer, it's happy to be an abomination.
That's right. I mean, I would be.
Let's not jump the gun. Let's see where how we.
But this seems like they're impure in relation to us, because I'm assuming that your wonderful dog, I forget her name, but she's not ever planning to go to the temple on her own for her own purposes, so she doesn't really care whether she's technically impure or not. So I mean, it does seem like it's all about us. Then it would be impure.
No, right. In this case, well, they are impure. The last sentence I think that you read is an interesting overlapping, right? Verse 8. What does it say? You shall not eat. Go ahead.
You shall not eat of their flesh or touch their carcasses. They are impure for you.
Okay. What's impure?
The carcass.
Their carcass is impure. The dead animal is impure. The live animal is not impure.
Okay. And a human body is also.
However, by extension, we have the idea that impurity also means don't eat it.
Okay.
So that we have all the way back in Noah's story, where we have the 2x2 animals and the 7x7 animals. And they're called the pure animals, take 7 of them. The impure animals, take only 2 of them. Right? And then we get into, the story about their sacrifices and so on. So there's not for us now, but those words, and throughout the Torah, they have a very specific, limited legal significance, but then they end up spilling over into moral and aesthetic and emotional kinds of meanings, much like you're asking here about abomination. That word sounds like a tough word. And again, I want to differentiate. We're going to get to it in a half a second. It's not the same word that we use for abomination, for instance, in sexual conduct.
So it's not toeva, it's a different word.
Not toeva, it's sheketz or teshaktu. Okay.
So
here, let's get to that. It's on
real quick though. So the leather, like the body of a cow, is not impure because we use it for the meat and leather and etc. So it's not the death thing that's impure about a dead domestic, a dead cat or dog or horse. It's you just can't. It's impure separately then, but a cow isn't.
No, but a treif animal, when that's dead, makes you, if you touch it, it's impure.
Right.
Impure. Yes.
But I mean, it's not a matter of it being dead, because I know a dead human is also impure, even though you might.
It's a matter of being dead.
Right. It is.
Right. The non-kosher animal doesn't make you impure when it's alive.
Okay. Right.
I'm trying to say.
I guess I'm not asking this right. So death in general makes things impure, at least people's bodies?
Not necessarily, but
okay.
Non-kosher animal, yes.
It is, okay.
And then we'll see that it's going to come out into other things also. But it's not automatic. Okay.
These you may eat of all that live in water. Okay. Anything in water.
We did the land creatures, and now we do water creatures.
Anything in water, whether in the seas or in the streams, that has fins and scales, these you may eat. But anything in the seas or in the streams that has no fins and scales, among all the swarming things of the water and among all the other living creatures that are in the water, they are an abomination for you. And an abomination for you they shall remain. You shall not eat of their flesh, and you shall not abominate their carcasses. Everything in water that has no fins and scales shall be an abomination for you.
Right. You shall abominate their carcasses. Right. I thought I heard you say shall not. So you shall abominate their carcasses. Right. And anything that doesn't have fins and scales is an abomination. And here's the word sheketz. And then the verb to abominate is right to shaketsu. So here we get this idea of fe, ich, right? Unfortunately, but it's the way it is in the language. A person who was not Jewish, or a person who acted, a Jewish person who acted like a non-Jewish person, wasn't pious, wasn't gentle, all of the kinds of stereotypes that were developed in Europe about the peasants that they looked down upon. They were called a shegets. Shegets is an abomination, a shekets. So in Yiddish, it became a shegets. And then if a Jewish person was acting in an improper way, don't act like a shegets. Or that person that so and so's neighbor, what a shegets. So they used it as a put down, as an insult, as a whatever the words, a slur. It was the fact that a person was not Jewish was automatically to be looked down upon, and then anybody that was Jewish who didn't comply with Jewish laws was considered, abominable. David, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the term was, I think used by Joseph to address his brothers. Don't tell them that you are...
Yeah, that's toeva.
Toeva.
Really? It was toeva?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, that's toeva.
Okay.
Right. So they're what can I say? Synonyms. Yeah, Michael.
I'm struck by some of the words in Hebrew, and I don't know if it's a play on words or if it's just a coincidence, but a lot of them seem to have repeating letters. They mean different things, but there's sheretz and there's shekets and there's kaskeset, and it's all they all seem to be playing off each other, even though they're very different things.
Right. So I mean, there's a certain amount, like you say, I think of ringing, rhyming of it. It's you have to stretch it a little bit. Kaskeset and shekets. There's the sh versus the s. And the other thing is that kaskeset is good and shekets is bad. And sheretz is creepy, crawly stuff. So that's sort of definitely mostly aligns with the shekets. However, it doesn't always align, right? Because the fish, for instance, are like pruruvu shirtzu ba'aretz, right? To go swarm, go, swim all over the place. So the word sheretz, most of us are not crazy about bugs. People that love bugs, the word sheretz is probably a term of endearment. Can you imagine, like, a person that that you're really, really passionately in love with? Oh, my little sheretz. If what do you call those?
Sounds nice.
My honeybee.
Etymologists, or what are they called? People who love words and insects, right?
Entomology.
Right. So anyway, but so yeah, I mean, there are certain things I don't know. Again, it's not consistent in terms of the pluses or the minuses, so I don't really know exactly what to do with it. But I do want to point out that we have, again, or in a much more pure way, actually, the application of general rules. There are no lists of treif fish, right? There are no lists of treif seafood. It just says, this is what you look for. If it doesn't have it, that's it, out, right?
And this is what led to all the trouble with swordfish, yeah?
This is
That's
so
right.
yes.
Yeah.
So here, that was couldn't the Torah just do us a favor, and clarify this kind of stuff? Sturgeon, swordfish, is it fins and scales or isn't it fins and scales? They do it for the hoofs and the cuds. Why don't they do it, for this? I have no idea. I don't have anything helpful to say about it. The one thing I also want to point out, and this comes to Jen's point, there is no term that could be seen as opprobrium or a real emotive reaction here in the animal, in the land creatures, as there is here for the fish, right? In the land creatures, the heaviest bad word you have is tameh, which is arguably not really that bad a word, right? But here we've got the sheketz, and the sheketz is about avoidance, right? The sheketz is about, you don't want to come near something like that. You want to get away from it.
That's probably good advice with sharks.
Right. But what about shrimp? So
I guess the salmon have no prohibition on eating shrimp. They're allowed to eat it, and we're allowed to eat salmon, which I find interesting.
right, the salmon have not joined the tribe. Last time I looked, right? So yeah, but the word sheketz, as is here, and it's a little ambiguous. Is it that they really are disgusting, or is it about keep your distance? On the one hand, it says, verse 10 is the first time we have it, right? At the end, they are an abomination to you. Sheketz heim lachem. Okay, so if you really want to pay attention to that phrase, it doesn't say sheketz heim, right? They're an abomination.
So it's only to you in relation to us.
Right. And so in other words, you should treat them, and that's why it says later on, v'sheketz yiyu lachem. And that's the next line, right? And an abomination for you, they shall remain. That's the translation here. Or another way would be is treat them. Yes, make them, see them as being something, awful, right? Don't eat from their don't eat from their flesh and their nevela, their corpse, their dead bodies. How do they translate it here? Carcasses. Keep them, get them tishaketsu, active verb. Make them something that you don't want to have anything to do with, right? That's the, and then it repeats it. Anything that doesn't have these qualifiers in the water, sheketz hu lachem. This is a sheketz for you.
So it seems like it's not anything innate in the animal. It's about our relationship with it.
You could argue that. I also just want to say that we should think a little bit, and we're going to get to it again in the next section in another second. Back to what I was saying before about what was the realia in terms of how you got food, how you came in contact with this stuff. So if you're talking about Israelites in general, but even with in human experience also, farming and land animal contact, I think, is much more universal than fishing and coming in contact with water animals. So I think so there's a little bit of an exoticism to the water creatures. They didn't have then, like we have now, fish farms.
Right.
They were actually all fish, whether they were sharks or whether they were little tilapia, they were all wild. So in the land animal genre, it maps out pretty much that wild is bad, and most of the kosher animals are domestic. Not most domestic animals are kosher, but most kosher animals are domesticated. With the fish, people didn't have pet goldfish, right? That wasn't the way it was. All fish was out there. It was out there in Yenemsveld, in some other territory, That wasn't.
Well, we had like the Galilee though, and we had rivers and.
Right, so the Sea of the Galilee was nobody's private property, right? It was nobody's field. It was nobody's forest. It was nobody. It was nature. It was out there, and going the river, cut through everybody's land and tribe and so on. Nobody owned the Jordan River, or the Kishon River, or the Euphrates River, and of course nobody owned the Mediterranean. So there's a little bit of a different kind of sense of where these animals, what their habitat is, and it's going to go one step further, in a way, or a more complicated situation when we do 13.
Is it possible that the shellfish are more of a temptation?
That what fish?
Is it possible that's because shellfish are more of a temptation?
I wouldn't know. So would they be considered an easier thing to catch or something like that? I mean, in terms of taste or anything like that, everybody's taste is different. I don't know what the eating habits were. People could look at this kind of stuff up. What do we have in terms of records of what the local populations like to eat? I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to check on. But again, if you're inland, you're not getting fish on a regular basis, right? If you're on the coast, fish may be much more of a normal thing for you. And then what is the temptation? Our lobster is a big temptation.
They don't look like something you should eat to me. They never did, even before I was Jewish. It's like you could kind of look at a lobster and say, I don't think we're supposed to eat that.
It looks like a real mean hombre, right? But they're actually, I think, not. But the way we kill them is disgusting.
Yeah, it's terrible. There's no ethical way to kill a lobster or a crab, so maybe that has something to do.
There is no ethical way?
Not really, not that I know of.
There's no way to take a pin and puncture its.
I don't know. It's not done. It's not practiced anyway.
No,
I have a question. Can I just jump in? I'm looking at the difference between the way that land animals and sea creatures are being talked about. With the sea creatures, it really does seem like totally stay away from them. And the land animals, of course, we use land animals. I mean, people use camels for transportation. You use animals that wouldn't provide kosher food for farming your land. I mean, so there's a lot of.
We have a very good relationship with donkeys.
Right. So, but one of the things, if you think about totally staying away, okay, so really keep your distance, but I'm just remembering that one of the things that was so prized for the tabernacle were dolphin skins. I mean, so that would be totally killing dolphins for their skins. I mean,
I wonder if that's actually
didn't kill the dolphins for their skins. The other
how did you get the dolphin skins?
We bought them from the people that didn't do anything with the skins because they were finishing up with the dolphins. And the dolphins, for instance, you can't eat. Right. So
there was a note in a time that it might not be dolphins, actually. Anyway,
that's an important point. That's a speculative translation. Nobody really knows whether orot chashim is dolphin skins.
So my point, though, is that, I mean, here, if you think about the hair, right? So if it's, you shouldn't just kill it for its fur, because this is not something you can eat. And so I'm trying to grapple about, well, what about the restrictions on sea creatures? And this thing about dolphin skins isn't if that's considered valuable, that seems like you'd be killing something just for its skin.
So again, first of all, their access to the dolphins. We've had this discussion before. Where the hell did they get any of this stuff? The gold, the gems, whatever. As they walked through the Red Sea, did they grab a couple of dolphins that were stuck, and take it? There was actually a couple of issues back in the New Yorker magazine. They had Moses, leading the children of Israel through the dry land between the waters, and you have two fish on the side, and the caption is, "And now I'm going to be late for work." So
I was just gonna say, yeah, if it makes you feel better, when the first time somebody said to me, offered me dolphin fish, I was horrified because I didn't know they meant mahi mahi. Like I had never heard it. And I just didn't even say dolphin fish. They just said dolphin on the menu. So if we can make that mistake now, surely like translating something that's thousands of years old, we actually have no idea what that dolphin skin was.
in terms of the tradition, what you're bringing up is a point that applies to a number of things. For instance, fill-in and things like that, where the tradition is convinced that no non-kosher ingredient can be brought into the production of holy items. So that would be a real argument to reject the translation dolphin skins for that. And in terms of what the Talmud says it was this creature that was created specifically for the purpose of the Jews being able to have this exotic thing for the tabernacle, and then it stopped existing after we finished using it. So who the heck knows? So but you're right that in the tradition we're not using treif animals products for creating the tabernacle or anything else. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah. One similarity in the rules of the land animals and the sea animals is that, the prohibitions are all based on these anatomic features, split hooves, chewing cuds, fins and scales. I'm not sure it carries over into the birds, but is there any reason for these anatomic features? Are there any similarities of one to another? Any reason why these should have been selected?
So let's do the birds first, so we get the full treatment, and then we'll come back to that question. It's a good question. There's been some discussion, but I want to warn you, it's pretty speculative. So let's get through the last category. Now the category is flying creatures, right? So these are creatures that in some way are connected to the air. Right? We've gone land, we've got sea, and now we've got air. Okay.
The following you shall abominate among the birds. They shall not be eaten. Oh, they are an abomination. That's sad. All right. The eagle, the vulture, and the black vulture. The kite, falcons of every variety, all varieties of raven. The ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, hawks of every variety. The little owl, the cormorant, and the great owl, the white owl, the pelican, and the bustard, the stork, herons of every variety, the hoopoe, and the bat. And then should I keep going? I think we're going to something else. Go. All right. All winged swarming things that walk on fours shall be an abomination for you. But these you may eat among all the winged swarming things that walked on fours, all that have above their feet jointed legs to leap with on the ground. Of these you may eat the following: locusts of every variety, all variety of bold locusts, crickets of every variety, and all variety of grasshopper. But all other winged swarming things that have 4 legs shall be an abomination for you.
Okay. So, and let's just, you know what? Okay. We're going to get to some continuation of this soon. So what do we have here?
And acts like the birds are just an abomination in and of themselves. That's kind of...
Say that again. What's an abomination in the...
The carrion birds that they mention, they all sound like they're an abomination amongst just in and of themselves. It doesn't say for you.
So,
but it doesn't say it's because they're carrion bird. I mean, it's a specific.
No, but they just happen to list all carrions. If I were a carrion, I would be offended. Except that you wouldn't be eaten by humans, so I guess no, I wouldn't be offended. But
so yes, so they're good for luggage, though.
Oh.
Carrion luggage.
There you go.
So. All right, back to this. What this comes out of that you're mentioning and that you're noticing is no general rule. There is no general rule here. Right? This is only lists. You made a generalization. You made a general.
I want a general rule.
What?
I want a general rule.
Yeah, me too. I'm very dissatisfied here. You try to make a general rule by saying, "Oh, it's carrion birds."
Well, there's a lot of carrions in there, so I would be suspicious of this list if I
No,
were.
I'm saying it's
But
totally
not all of
legitimate.
them are
What you did is totally legitimate. But let's be just, in terms of the text didn't go there. The text didn't say that at all, or it didn't give us any other kind of, only birds that have 4 claws, per leg, or only, birds that, whatever. It never gives us any kind of general rule at all. It just gives us lists of birds. And this is where the question of identifying what these birds are becomes a problem.
Oh, and it puts bats with birds also, I noticed.
Because they're flying creatures. They run around in the air, right? And then we get that interesting thing about the locusts and the crickets. Yum, yum. And again,
Environmentally, that may become relevant.
many people are talking about it. So, and identifying which are the locusts. Yeah, when it says in the translation, I want to just, of every variety. That's a choice of a translation that I don't know. I think it's a little misleading, because that sounds like a general rule that all locusts are kosher. No, it says liminehu, right? Right? Yes, this is limino and then liminehu, to its type. So I think that it's actually a little more of a limited word that's being used. And we have certain Jewish communities in the Middle East that have identified what kind of locusts they think are kosher, and we have no grounds to say that they're wrong. But we don't have traditions for ourselves to identify them. But there are people that have created these banquet events where they try to get exotic foods, where the whole point of the evening is going, I didn't know that was kosher. Oh wow, I didn't know that was kosher. And like they go through this whole 6-course banquet with all kinds of stuff, based on the exoticism and the curiosity of what's what. And it works both ways. There is still a family today. They descend from the Katzenellenbogen family, which explains a lot, just their name, about why they're so weird, that don't eat turkey, because turkey is never mentioned in the Torah. And the question of whether turkey satisfies the list of creatures that are kosher, it was a big question, because we didn't get into this question in any serious way until there was a Jewish community in the United States, in North America, because there were no turkeys pretty much in Europe. So they didn't encounter turkeys. Forget about the holiday of Thanksgiving. They just didn't have a tradition about eating this kind of stuff. I've said this before. When my mother's mother, she came from Syria. Before that, she was born in Egypt. She came from Syria. When she came here, she thought that tomatoes were kosher. But she had never seen a tomato in her life. So she treated it at the beginning as shaketz teshaktzenu, make it an abomination. Keep away from stuff. If you don't know what it is, then keep it away. So so we don't know. We're limited, and why the Torah decided to make it this way, I have no idea. I don't know. But back to the question: are these disgusting creatures?
I don't think so. I hope, again, God created them and said this was good. So why would they ever be disgusting in and of themselves, as opposed to just wrong for us to eat?
When I was a kid, I remember learning a story about King David. He wasn't King David yet, about David and King Saul, that maybe some of you are familiar with. At one point, the love affair between Saul and David completely sours, and Saul becomes convinced that David is his rival and that David wants to get him. And then he starts running after David as a fugitive, and Saul tries to kill him, right? And he's running after him and trying to catch him, and David has to keep hiding. And then at one point, David, with his band of, he has this band of, rough and ready people that hang out with him. They see that Saul is camped out right next to them, right by them, and he's gonna get them. And David crawls into a cave, and then a spider weaves a spider's web at the opening of the cave. And then Saul comes by, and his henchmen say he could be hiding in that cave. So we should get into the cave and see if that's where he is. And of course, caves have a long history of being great hiding places in the land of Israel, throughout the all the military stuff that was going on with the Romans and other times. So and then Saul looks at the spider's web and says, nah, if he would have gone into the cave, he would have broken the spider's web. So he can't be in there. So therefore, so he's not there, and he walks off. And then afterwards, David, says, "Oh, I thought that this creature was worthless. It's a disgusting, insect, and look at that, it saved my life." So every creature has its day, so to speak, right? Yeah. Okay.
But from the text, is it saying that these are just in and of themselves abominations, or was it just like, I'm not going to repeat for you?
Well, again, it says the phrase is sheketz hu lachem, right? This is the phrase is we found it first in verse 10, right? At the end of verse 10, and then we say it at the beginning of verse 11, the end of verse 12.
But that says for you. It doesn't say for you in it, or at least not in the English.
Where? It's in verse. Well, I just want to go over. It's in verse 20. It's in verse, right, and it's in verse 23, right?
Oh, I'm looking at 13. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination.
13 is the outlier. Correct. 13 says, and these are the flying creatures. These are the ones you should avoid like the plague, right? And lo yeachlu, they shall not be eaten. Sheketz heim, and there you don't have the lachem. It's the one place you don't have the lachem. Could we make something out of that? I don't know. We could.
Or can it just be? It's the context has been, all along has been for you.
Right. I don't know. And is it only those three? Only the eagle and the what? And the vulture and the black vulture? Does it stop at the end of that verse? What about the rest of them? Are they also absolutely disgusting? Or to be kept, keep your distance at all costs? I don't know. Look, we do know, historically speaking, phenomenologically, that the kosher laws created a culture of abomination, right? Until modern times, and to a certain extent, even still now, faintly, it still works for many people. But there's the idea that to eat pork was considered not just the wrong thing to do, because people didn't care about doing the wrong thing anymore, but it actually made some people sick to their stomach if they found out that they ate pork, right? So there was this very visceral, literally, a visceral kind of cultural reaction that got developed. So it doesn't quite say that in the text, but it certainly did become the effect that and it also took, became for things that were not literally called sheket, for instance, cheeseburgers. Right, and of course it goes both ways, right? The exoticism of the prohibited for some people becomes very attractive, So, I would, the first thing I did when I took off my yarmulke was eat a cheeseburger. Right? I wanted to know what that was like. Right. But, but for other people, that was considered like such a sickening concept. You never wanted to be able, you never wanted to engage in something like that, even though you didn't believe anything about it, that it became part of what you were.
Is it possible then that because Judaism has such a usually good view of the world and creation, that the Torah had to work extra hard to make some things seem that you had to avoid them at all costs? If you're Jewish, I mean, again, it's not an abomination.
That's it's an interesting line of thought that we're not going to be able to pursue because we're at the end of the line here.
We're at the end. Okay.
But maybe the one last thing in terms of all of this stuff, which can seem so arbitrary and so just, chaotic in terms of when is there a rule, when isn't there a rule, here's a list, it's not, what does this mean? Is that the Torah makes the point in verse 45 that this is about holiness, right? Whether you understand it that way or not. Just let's read 45 and then, even though we're out of time, just let that be the last word. Page 642.
For I, the Lord, am he who brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall be holy, for I am holy.
Okay. That's the punchline for this whole system. Okay. We'll continue another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.